I was trying to frame the papers today, or the importance of the journal for the society, and like most cheapskates, I went to the web. And I came across a very interesting article, which is available to all and sundry. It's a CUNY academic work, City University of New York article, published in 2012, and it's called Local History Journals and Their Contributions. Where would we be without them? It's a very short article, but it makes a few points, very valid points, which I think Angela has hinted at already. The first of these is that journals produced by local societies are immediate communicative links between the members and the public. These journals extend the readership and the membership of most societies. And looking at the faces here tonight, it's nice to see people that I never knew had an interest in history or archaeology present. Secondly, the findings in CUNY showed the importance of journals in disseminating new historical information. The fact that these articles are published is seen as solidification and a justification of their being. Publication immediately makes us realize they must be true, and that's more than important for local historical societies. Journals like this are not bound by traditional restrictions. Journals can have anything from culinary recipes to history to archaeology to scientific articles. Whereas if you look at most journals produced by academics, they're very restricted, very narrow in their definitions. And I think this journal is really true to that ideal. It tries to cover everything in as general and as interesting a way as is possible. Journals, the last point, journals deals with material that may never be documented in a traditional format. I mean, the articles in here would not be published elsewhere were they not included in this format. They are particularly interesting, but they're relevant for Bantry and its environs. And the last point which the report makes is that the digitization of these journals in the future will disseminate the information immediately on a national scale and beyond that on an international level. So when we started looking at the journal, what were our hopes? We tried first of all to be as inclusive as we could in terms of time and space and material. In terms of time, the articles deal with the prehistoric to the medieval, to the 17th century, and right on up to the 21st century. They cover every possible time period that Bantry has seen throughout its history. There are three broad general themes within the journal itself. The first of those is the articles that deal with individuals. The second, the number of articles that deal with institutions. And the third, the high-level generic coverage articles. The individuals covered include G.W. Biggs. I had the pleasure this morning of going around town with G.W. Biggs, and I always get this wrong, so Susan can correct me, great-great-granddaughter. And she was amazed to see his name so important and still so prominent, whether it's in the square, in William Street, in Bridge Street, it's everywhere. But little did we know about him. To see the real story of G.W. Biggs and his importance in the town, there's a very fine article written by his great-granddaughter, Susan. Ellen Hutchins, thanks to the Bantry Historical Society, was a very neglected figure, Ireland's first botanist. And you may think you know all about her thanks to the celebrations from last year. And again, I'm going to ask Angela for help here. The article was written by her great-great-great-grandniece. Two greats, great-great-grandniece, Madeleine Hutchins. And it's a particularly interesting and slightly poignant article dealing with her very short life of 8 years in which she became not only nationally famous, but internationally famous as a botanist. The Evansons and the O'Donovan families were two plantation families who came to Kilcrohane and Doris in the 17th century. And their very existence and the differences between them are finally documented in a very good article by Pat Crowley. The last article to deal with people or personages deals with the freedom fighters from the Bantry area, and it's a benchmark study by Sean Kelly. Again, very nicely, when you read the article, you will realise that the families of all these people still exist within our community. So it's a very nice article linking the modern with the early 20th century. In terms of institutional coverage, we have 4 areas that are dealt with. There are very few young people now who will remember the railway station. Anybody here who can't? Well, for those who can't or don't want to go that far back, it was over very close to the new supermarket. And its existence and its near destruction is documented in a very fine article by Oliver Doyle, and in particular a fire that happened in the railway station in 1954, which was, I think, under Oliver's father's guidance at that stage. The brightest minds in Hourihane are familiar to most of us, but little did we know that one of the largest, brightest mines in Europe was to be found less than 10-15 miles from Bantry in Dreen-le-Mon. And its history is beautifully documented by Eugene McSweeney. And again, it paves the way for studies on the Hourihane mines here in Bantry. The Roman Catholic Church in Bantry, St. Finbarr's, throughout history has been feted by travel writers in the 18th and 19th century as one of the finest buildings in the town, not only in terms of its importance in an elevated position, but also its architectural innovations. And all of its history is beautifully documented by Richard Butler in the second article in the collection. If there's one central pivotal building in Bantry that's familiar to all of us, it has to be Vicary's Hotel. First of all, a private house, and then one of the most important hotels, not only in the town, but in the south of Ireland. And I could think of nobody better to write the history of that institution than Hazel Vickery. And she does so in a really inclusive manner, covering the garage, the hotel itself, the famous visitors, the businesses that were there, right up to its demise in 2006. I can see Angela getting nervous at my length, but I promise there are very, very little more to go. Angela's husband, Frank O'Donoghue, has a very fine article on lighting Bantry. If you think of what existed in Bantry before electricity came, you go back to the time of the oil heaters and oil lamps. He documents, beg your pardon? He documents the old manner of heating before Nugent came to Bantry with electrification. And in fact, he goes right on in to the ESB's presence, which I think was around 1949 in Bantry. One subject in archaeological terms that has been studied ad infinitum is the Síle na gig. I don't know any adequate or satisfactory term to describe what a Síle na gig is, but the most concise is an exhibitionist female figure. And we have to abandon our 21st century perceptions and to focus in on the sexual attributes of these figures. That's not fair. These were created in the medieval period, and the appreciation and perception of them was entirely different, as Anya Brosnan does beautifully in, again, a very fine study dealing yet a new way of looking on these figurines. If the Síle na gigs have been studied or overstudied, then one neglected area has to be rock art. Very few studies have existed or have been published on rock art, particularly in the Bantry area. And Finola Finlay and Robert Harris are the two experts in the field. And here they deal with the Ballybane group of carving, sculpture, in a much broader context, looking at the carvings in relation to purpose, function, iconography on a national scale. The last article of the 12 that are included in the volume deals with streets, lanes, roads and terraces in the town itself. And it's my effort to look at how the streets of Bantry took on their characteristics. What is a street? What is a road? What differentiates it? When did they get their names? What were the older names and how are they changing? It's not an easy task to get a volume like this to this stage, but it is a very pleasant one. And for me, this was one of the most exciting journals to have edited. I've done close on 60 of them in my lifetime, but this one certainly was the one that taught me the most. I really learned so much about my hometown and what is still going on, and that's the beauty and the value of a journal and the society here. The journal covers the town itself, the immediate hinterland, and the surrounding area from Doris to Kilcrohane. And it's my last task and pleasurable task to thank Angela and the Society for supporting it, and to thank all of the contributors and authors for answering my endless queries and working towards making the studies the best they could. These are not definitive studies, they're merely appetizers to make us more interested in what's around us. I'm going to finish with one question which I learned from this book. Can anybody tell me here where in Bantry is Newman's Corner, the Land of Egypt, Carberry Road, and Friars Walk? It's a question that can be answered at future art historical meetings by the Society. Thank you very much.